We talked with Stephen Meger of the band Underpair Skies, featuring a unique musical blend of vintage swing, cabaret, tango, samba, bossa, and flamenco influences. We talk about origins, the process for choosing music, reworking it, and what is coming up for this group that celebrates the music of French sidewalk cafes, vintage jazz clubs, and Latin rhythms. You can find more conversations, food reviews, live music, and events on our website, lacrosselocal.com. I'm Amy.
And I'm Brent.
And this is Lacrosse Local.
My name is Stephen Meger. I was born in northern Minnesota, a small town about 20 miles south of Duluth. I can kind of remember the day I fell in love with guitar. I was bicycling with some friends of mine, and we stopped at a guy's place out in the country where we were going to bike, and he happened to have an electric guitar, which I had never seen in person before, and I ended up picking it up. Some reason I can't explain it. I was so infatuated with it that I remember all the guys left. They left me behind, and I just said, "Look, I'll meet up with you later." So this is around Beatlemania time for me, and I just had such an interest in playing guitar. My friend who had the guitar didn't know music, but he had the system of writing out music using numbers, so the string number and the fret. I didn't have a guitar, so the first song that I ever learned was a Ventures instrumental called Bulldog, and he wrote out the music in numbers, so it looked like a code. And I remember in school, like during study hall, I'd pull out this tattered piece of paper, and I would just study the numbers because I didn't have a guitar to play it on. And I think my dad realized at some point that I really wanted to play, so he bought me my first instrument. I started learning Beatles records and anywhere I could, like some of the old Venture tunes. I had a buddy in town that, because I had a guitar, he had to get one, and we started teaching each other. Eventually, we started playing at churches, church music, where we could get away playing like mellow rock. So we were playing Joe Walsh as kind of the prelude to Catholic service. And one thing led to another. I eventually got into a band in high school where we were playing cover material. We got a gig at all places at the Officers Club at an air base in Duluth. I kind of realized there that we had the most fun, and they had the most fun if you could dance to the music. So we started playing R&B and blues, and I think I learned a lot gigging. So between Beatles records and learning their songs and just gigging and doing some cover material, I more or less taught myself to play guitar, and I've been playing ever since.
You're just naming a few influences there. I've seen you play a handful of times, probably more than a handful of times, just being from the La Crosse area. How did you get into like the flamenco tango sort of style that you guys are known for?
Yeah, thanks. I read an article in Guitar Player magazine, I think it was, a number of years ago. And I still kind of recall, it said something like this, that guitar players that play rock or blues at some point may find themselves wanting to kind of take it to a different place. And the fork in the road was classical or jazz. And as much as I like classical music, it seemed like jazz was going to be maybe a direction I would lean towards, just for the challenge of learning new styles of guitar. And I did that for a while. I played with my friend Chris Bukai. We had a jazz duo where we played some original music that he had written. But it was always a challenge for me, he being the better player and me, holding it down as best I could. And, I think we had a good sound, but it wasn't until I stumbled across so-called Gypsy Jazz that things started to kind of resonate. And how I got into it, I don't know. There was a number of years ago kind of a resurgence in the music of Django Reinhardt. It had hit the coast first, the West Coast in particular. I just kept reading and hearing about it. Eventually saw it live a few times. And it's the kind of music that on guitar, I find that it's on one level, extremely difficult to play. If you want to play very, very well, it's difficult. But if you want to get your feet wet in kind of a jazz vein, it's more, for me, it was more accessible than, let's say, Wes Montgomery style or whatever you might want to call it, a bebop kind of approach to jazz. A whole lot of fun to play. It's fun, the style that we play. It's called Gypsy Jazz, not to be pejorative. The word gypsy, referring to the Roma people, sometimes referred to as jazz manouche. But it's a style of music that began with Django Reinhardt in France, in Paris, in the 30s, 1930s. What it was Django Reinhardt hearing recorded music that was coming from America, from the States, and Gershwin and other jazz at the time, and then reinventing it and using the influences that he had in Europe and with the musicians that were in his community. And he took it to a different level. He reinvented jazz at the time, was a virtuoso on guitar, and so many players that you might not think do cite Django Reinhardt as being an inspiration. Eric Clapton, Jimmy Page, a lot of the classic rock guitar players, Ritchie Blackmore, some Hendrix, you can hear it in their playing on occasion. But a lot of the techniques Django Reinhardt had invented at the time. And I don't try to be Django Reinhardt, and our band isn't trying to be anything other than ourselves, but we do get inspired by the music and the feeling. It's music that's danceable, and it's accessible to any age and any sort of collection of people that are interested in good music that has beautiful melodies and danceable rhythms. And that's kind of where we started with it.
Just going to your Facebook page, I think your description really tells all about it, about Underpair Skies. Celebrates the music of French sidewalk cafes, vintage jazz clubs, Argentine dance halls, and Latin rhythms. Instantly, that's, I could hear you guys playing. I mean, you kind of told us about your origin with this music, but what was the origin story of Underpair Skies? Is this something that just easily fell together, or?
Well, it sort of had a background that was several years in the making. The short story is that I got interested in this music and realized that I would like to play with other musicians. And I met a music student who was at UWL, my friend Tyson, and we got together. He was on violin and I was on guitar, and we realized that we could kind of get the sound with even the two instruments. And we started the band. We eventually got a clarinet player and a stand-up bass player. We gigged a number of times as the La Crosse Hot Club. Everyone, other than me, eventually graduated from UWL and moved on. And I, being of a different generation and having a family here in La Crosse, I was here. So I was interested in sort of reconstituting the band. I got talking to my friend Larry Dalton, who's a very gifted bass player, and we were just getting to know each other. And I told him about the type of music and the project that I was interested in. He said, "Yeah, sure, I'm in." He said, but I said, "We need a third player." And I thought, violin, clarinet, what direction could we go with this? And a trio was easier to get together than a quartet or anything bigger. So we thought maybe three players. Larry said, "Well, I know this accordion player." And I remember at the time thinking, what? Of all instruments, an accordion? Well, I gave my friend Ron, a call, sent him an email and just asked him if he'd even be interested. And to paraphrase him, because I looked this up to kind of refresh my memory in an old email, but he said essentially, interested, let's start the revolution. So the thought was there's a genre of music and there's a whole catalog of music that you don't hear. And so we got together as a trio. The reason we're called Underpair Skies is the first song I ever played with Ron was a waltz, and the name of the waltz is Underpair Skies. And we had our first gig at a farmer's market, and what's the name of the band? And I thought, oh my God, we don't really have a name. And I just thought, well, at least for now, let's just name it the first song we ever played. So ever since, we've been Underpair Skies. We always start every gig that I can think of with that waltz. It's a waltz from a film called Underpair Skies. You have to be careful if you're Googling us for Underpair Skies, you're going to get all sorts of other references sometimes to that movie or to the soundtrack.
That's cool. I didn't know that. That's
Yeah.
interesting. So what is your process like for, choosing music? Do you kind of play them traditionally, or do you kind of rework them to your own? Do you throw in your own pieces, or?
Kind of all of that. I mean, what we do is, at least initially, our kind of like mission statement or guiding light or whatever was, let's look at Django Reinhardt, Stefan Grappelli, the music that they had recorded back in the 30s and 40s. We certainly have a selection of that in our catalog that we play, but then it sort of began or started to turn into other directions. And essentially anything that can lay well with the three instruments we have: an accordion, a guitar, an acoustic guitar, and a stand-up acoustic bass. That led us to other styles. We all have other musical interests. Ron has played world music and dance music, Eastern European music. Larry is trained classically in jazz. I've got a kind of a rhythm and blues, rock, Irish, actually, traditional Irish music background. And so we take all these different influences in. So now we're playing music. It's not strictly per region, but Eastern Europe, Brazil, Argentina, Venezuela, Colombia, any kind of rhythm, sambas, rumbas, swing, vintage, Americana, jazz. And we do try to reinvent it with our instrumentation, and sometimes modernize it. Oftentimes we'll throw in quotes. At least the band gets some musical quotes from the Beatles or Deep Purple, or every now and then, if you're paying attention, you may hear some what are somewhat outside influences kind of creep in. So whatever has a beautiful melody, a good rhythm, we're kind of open to it.
I'm sure it affected you as well, being a musician. How was COVID for you and the band? I mean, it seemed like you guys played pretty regularly across the La Crosse region. How was the past 18 months? Was it difficult, or was there a time to kind of reflect and maybe try other musical avenues?
Well, like most other people, COVID had a big impact on what we do as a band. We play, I don't know, maybe 40 or 50 gigs a year on average. And we had a great year all scheduled. We were going to be playing at the Charmant and Waterfront and El Morro and other venues. And that all got shut down. And I think we, realized that it was going to be a different year coming up. We kind of momentarily kind of retreated into our own recesses, kept in touch and stuff, but we're kind of heartbroken by not being able to play live and play for people. But we decided to invest that time, and we did some recordings. They were recorded individually at each of our homes, and then, as you can do, send files digitally through the internet and then stitch them together to make it sound like you're actually all playing at the same time. So it was mainly just for our own interests. We did something that was somewhat avant-garde. That we probably won't play out. We did a Beatles tune, Till There Was You, from their first album, which dates back to an earlier movie soundtrack, I believe. We had a third project that was in the works that got a little too complicated and kind of got away from us. I know for me, I've kind of gone back, and even now I'm going back to the roots of the music. I'm studying now Charlie Christian a bit more, Benny Goodman, Django Reinhardt, of course, trying to just take this time and refine my skills as a guitarist. We hope to be playing live more. We've done a few dances, wedding receptions, played at a winery in the last several months. We'll just have to wait and see how the picture is in a few months. We're starting to book soon, but it's all going to depend on what makes sense and what's safe.
What are you excited for over the next year or two? Is there anything coming down the road with yourself or the band that's you're interested in sharing with people?
We're hoping to be playing out live when the time is right. I think we have the most fun and our strongest interest is not in recording, but in just performing live. And so we're crossing our fingers, looking forward, hopefully, in the new year, doing more live appearances. That would be the main thing. And then also always continuing to find new repertoire and keep it fresh for us and for our followers too.
So if people want to follow along, maybe check out a show when you announce those, what's the best avenue for them to go to?
The main way that we get that information out is on our Facebook page, and that's Underpair Skies Band, B-A-N-D at the end. We also, try to post in local digital newspapers and that kind of thing, but Facebook is probably the main thing. You can always shoot us an email too. That address is underpairskiesband@gmail. And that would be another way that if anyone wanted to get a hold of us to find out where we're playing or even potentially book us for something.
Yeah, and it also looks like off your Facebook page, you have a SoundCloud account with a number of songs that people can kind of peruse as well.
Yeah, those were done at a live show a couple of years ago. We haven't had another live recording as such. We never really intended to make that commercial, but it's out there, warts and all. It's live. There's no overdubs. It is what it is. I would just say that in the couple of years since we've been playing since that recording, we've just added new repertoire. We've finessed. I think we grow every year, over the last 5 years or more. The band has just gotten tighter and more refined, and we're looking forward to continuing in that direction.
Lacrosse Local Podcast is a production of River Travel Media. Do you have an interview idea you'd like to share with us? Message us on Facebook at Lacrosse Local. Find out more about us at lacrosselocal.com, and you can subscribe to the Lacrosse Local Podcast on your favorite podcast app. If you like us, rate us 5 stars. We appreciate it.